I have not seen modern Eminem. I don't know if that's good. I don't know if I'm the real Slim Shady now, but we'll see what happens. But John, getting to the real heart of the matter. You know what? We saw the big patch that came out, and we saw a bunch of pro players go online and say, "These characters, my main is dead. They are dead. I can't play them anymore." And then those characters went on to place really high in tournament, specifically Armika, Dalsum, and it wasn't everyone. We had awesome people like Akita. We're both fans of his. He's a great Dalsum player. He weighed in and said, "Hey, this is going to impact some Dalsum players, but for me, good to go." We've had some. There's been some mixed stuff on there, but my whole point about this is that when you see a top player complaining online, they have so much privilege. If they're playing a character like Mika, Karen, Cammy, and other stuff like that, they're just used to having the best, right? They're like, their champagne is served cold every single morning the moment they wake up out of bed. And what do you? I can see from your reaction, you have your face, you have a reaction. What is your reaction? You know that they have cold champagne in the morning when it's slightly warm.
Yes, there have been seasons where certain characters from the list that you just mentioned have had to go for some cold duck, I think, but like Mika has not always been a major benefactor. So I want to say that. Now, I don't want to take too much out of your momentum here because I think you're going somewhere with it. Yes, those characters have been, among the top, and some of them just matter of fact, some of them have had their time in the limelight. But you're not wrong when you say that as soon as a patch rolls out, everybody knows that their character got destroyed. They know the character that's going to be the absolute best in the game. And then real life hits. And so many times we've seen that you can't just take a bunch of really strong looking patch notes and say this is exactly how things are going to play out, because seeing them on paper and seeing how everything acts within the actual atmosphere of the game with all of the other stuff that's constantly going on, bouncing off of it and dancing with it, those are two completely different things. But we are starting to see what is coming out of Street Fighter V here in the middle of Season 5 following a second balance patch, and now we have returned to offline play. And I think that's going to be a big thing too. I was playing a Ken player today. By the way, Ken players are back because of this patch, I think.
Yes,
and oh my gosh, I was just reminded so immediately and vividly of the frustrations of, I'm getting hit, so I'm going to spam a medium punch, or here comes a random Tatsu for footsies, and it's my fault for getting hit. I'll take it. But also, hot damn, is that not the game I want to play? So welcome back, Ken players. We missed you.
Okay, well, no. I have to throw this back at you because they're like, all the Ken players out there are saying this is coming from a Necalli player.
Yeah.
And what would be your rebuttal to that? Because if anyone's ever felt random, it's freaking Necalli in this game. He's pretty freaking random,
I think that
right?
you have a particular hate for Necalli because I have put you through the ringer so many times with Necalli. I don't think that everybody feels the same way you do, and I think you have a particular bias against the character because of playing against me for so long. But I don't think that people equate Necalli and Ken like that.
I've read the comments, and I have seen specifically Cammy players go in and say, what kind of gall does this guy have to be talking crap about Cammy when he plays Necalli? I've actually seen it. I have proof. I don't know if I can find it now, but I have proof in my head. That's the most important part. Like, what would be your rebuttal to that besides it's just me?
You're right.
You're
right.
It's not me, it's you.
And I think that the comment that you're talking about also cited how many Capcom Pro Tour wins Necalli has from over the years. Well, he was a stupid good character in Season 1. He was a really good character in Season 2. And then he was a character from Seasons 3 on. And sure, I mean, if you want to complain about Necalli, there's like 6 of us that exist in the first place, and we're not winning stuff at all. So yeah, go for it. I mean, I almost don't even want to entertain the question, but I'll give it that much and say,
okay. Well, now, and again, I agree with you here, but I do want to go with our commenters on this who said this. Now, wouldn't the same complaint apply to Kin, where there's 6 Kin players now, and there's probably about 600 now since the patch changes happened? But in like, what is Kin winning now? What is Kin won, and what would be the difference there?
I wasn't complaining that Ken's overpowered.
Yeah.
I was just complaining that Ken players play online and use some interesting tactics that are not going to get them to, in fact, I don't think that you're going to win consistently with these kinds of tactics. And sure enough, the Ken player that, well, he beat me once, but then he didn't beat me again, and it's like, yeah, it's just frustrating ways of playing the game, which is actually something that'll segue later on in like the fourth quarter of the podcast. But and remember that for when we go there.
Yeah, and that's the perfect answer there is that when you do play these kind of random characters like Balrog and other stuff, like Balrog is actually my personal nemesis right now. He's the character I'm struggling with the most. I literally spent like an hour or 2 hours just watching footage of Rose versus Balrog last night, trying to find everything. I ended up actually finding my own footage and having to use that, which is not good, to try to find a basis for the matchup. And I think I have something now, but I'm not sure. But that's your answer. When people say, hey, like Kin does this or Necalli does this and stuff like that, well, characters that have those kind of like just crazy ass moments, they're very susceptible to all or nothing. It's very rare that those characters are coming through. So that is one of the things with Kin. But again, my argument is you need that in these games. Again, I don't play characters like that, and those characters are a personal frustration to me. But I do think those characters have a very firm place in fighting games. And like if they're not there, if you don't have some crazy characters, like your roster gets kind of boring. And so I actually have no problem with Necalli, and I actually think he's pretty darn well done at this point in time in this game. He's just fine, and I'm pretty good with Kin as well. That's the acceptable amount of crazy you kind of have to live with, and that's kind of where I go with that. But anyway, so we got derailed.
Yeah, it's a means toward like more like fun and spontaneity and craziness and party mode. But you want to be able to also corral it in higher levels of play. And as long as it's not so strong that you can't do stuff to fairly consistently shut it down or have a sense of control about it, then I think you're okay. So yeah, you do want some party casual mode in your game, but not so much that it's actually harming the competitive aspect of it.
Yes. And so that's actually one of the things about Mika. She's a crazy character. It's, you're pretty much seeing her throw everything at the screen. I know Luffy and a lot of other players are kind of notorious for not exactly holding forward, but not exactly not holding forward either. And you will see it for large portions of the matchup. And it's like, that's the steamrolling nature of grapplers. And obviously something we're going to talk about later, but this is where I go with this, is that these are some of the players that are going out there and saying like, look, my character is toast. I can't play him anymore. And it's like, dude, you just tied for third place at the first international competition we've had an offline play since like basically COVID happened. One of the first major ones anyway, right? And this is what I talk about when you go on Twitter and stuff and you see opinions from top players. You need to realize that their opinions are very jaded by them winning, by them basically needing to perform at the highest of levels because that's their job, right? Yours and I's job is to dissect these games as fair and as accurately as we can. We don't care about winning as much as we care about these games being great. Like these games being great really impacts what we do here a ton. And so we went in there before and we talked about how Europe was using V-Shift better than anyone else. Hey, shocker, Europe won this event over the Capcom Cup champion IDOM, kind of thing. And this is something you and I called. We also called the game being much more zone heavy, right? Much more based around being able to actually keep people out. It's the Street Fighter V version of zoning, so it's not Street Fighter 4 zoning. It's not Street Fighter 2 zoning. It's Street Fighter V's version of it, right? And it's not nearly as good as it once was, but it's so much more effective now than it actually has been. And so we've got a Sagat up there. We got a Dhalsim up there. We got IDOM winning, getting second with Poison. He obviously won Capcom Cup. Like these are all zone heavy characters. You can zone and win in this game now. That's one of the biggest messages I have.
I was watching Bonchan's Sagat against Tokido's Urien today. And one of the things that I very immediately recognized was that the way Bonchan was playing Sagat wasn't when you say zoning, I think the first place that our minds go is you back up to the other side of the screen and you throw fireballs and you try to get the person to jump over them or overextend. It wasn't that. It was constantly a mix of the threat of Sagat's like medium kick and his standing heavy punch and maybe even a crouching medium kick, peppered in with fireballs as farther pokes. And we've talked about fireballs in that capacity before. It was very much more of a mid-range zoning while still using fireballs and such. And the potential for a jump forward was still there. They didn't happen often. In fact, I think as I recall, Bonchan did more jumping forward than Tokido did. But the point was it was a slow paced, very long round kind of endeavor, and a lot of these were where they're playing footsies and they're zoning with their normals, and then the fireballs, like I say, become something of a farther extension of that. But things are not
Right.
happening like, full screen zoning. They're not really even happening at jump range zoning. They're happening at like farthest reaching normal spacing, and that's very interesting, and it's very calculated. And you were mentioning Luffy earlier. I watched his match with Takamura, and you'd think Mika just explosions into set play-ish sort of scenarios, and I know that that's been nerfed about her a handful of times over the season, so she can't really do that anymore. First of all, you wouldn't expect to see Mika at all, based on things that I think Luffy has said about her, and the fact that V-Shift is supposed to be so detrimental to the grappling types like her. But here she was going toe to toe with Takamura's Akuma and playing very effective footsies. The game came
Yeah.
down to whiff punishing, and there's a little bit of Street Fighter V craziness, especially when you get V triggers and you get the cover of an air fireball to come in and things along those lines. Nadesh goes on her way, but even then, use things like V shift to creatively get around it. The game has so much space to breathe, and where we find ourselves going is that mid-range zoning footsies, patient, pick your spots, let your opponent overextend, catch a forward dash kind of thing, and then go into your stuff. And then a lot of times, it won't be just one knockdown that decides things. That can happen, especially with characters like Laura or G, or I mean even Zangief if he just gets in and gets his vortex kind of stuff going on. But a lot of times it will return back to the neutral, and you're having this kind of proper sword fight, fencing, gentlemanly endeavor, and I'm liking what I see.
Me too. It is, and I want to be very careful here and just mention that, as you said, it's Akuma still up there, it's Karen still up there, it's Cammy still up there. Like all the Rushdown characters are still good. Like people who are worried that this game is going to be too like zone heavy now, and you're just not going to have these. It's these characters are still awesome, and this is where I really go with this. People complaining about nerfs. It's like it is so hard to actually take a top tier character and nerf them into oblivion this late in a game's lifespan. Now we saw this happen in season 1 with Ryu, Chun-Li, and Nash, that they actually got obliterated. But when you get later on in a game, like it does not happen that often. Like your top tier stay there. Now you still see some rare exceptions of like a character go from low tier to top tier and a few other things, but for the most part, it is genuinely hard. If you look at like the history of Street Fighter 4, the low tiers pretty much stayed low tier. Like there, a few people climbed up and other stuff, but it did not happen often, right? So anyway, it's just look at the stuff like kind of a side eye. Give the side eye there if I can do that properly. But anyway, if some of the zoners to look out for now. Obviously, we've covered Poison, Guile, and Menat in the past. But again, add Dalsum, Ryu, Chun-Li, and I'd personally now include Sagat and Rose into that mix too. I think Rose is a tournament viable character. She's pretty good. She's hard to play though. Like any rush or any zoning in this game, it's just. Oof. But the game's still Rushdown. It's still Street Fighter 5. It's still Rushdown Fighter 5.
Well,
You're not getting away from that.
kind of, but as I think about it, and as I think about the different character archetypes, which is something I've been really trying to consider for this week because of man, that coming segment that I keep bringing up. As I look at it, and as I've looked at the Red Bull Kumite footage and how the game has been evolving, it's like the characters have different ends that they want to get to, right? Sagat doesn't really want to be up in your face most of the time. He wants to be at that comfortable distance where he might be able to get a light into DP sort of a combo and then comfortably be where you have to make mistakes. He doesn't necessarily want to be rushing you down like Cammy might or something like that. And Menat probably wants to be even farther back than that, where she can just be hitting you with heavies and such, and then eventually getting enough meter to do bigger combos. But that said, it seems like we're at a place where no matter what character type you are, you want to be able to manipulate the neutral, and that's where you can start to get what you need. Like that's the starting point for almost all characters, as far as I can tell right now, to get to where they want to be. Now they want to get to different places, but that seems to be the main road for everybody, and that's really cool, and that's what you want out of a Street Fighter game. So you establish that distance, you establish those whiff punishing threat kind of normals and specials and such, and then you use that to get your character to where they want to be, whether that be up close, whether that be sweep range, whatever it is. And so the different characters can do that. Now, yes, you still got GV trigger, you still got Laura V trigger stuff. So there is some really good up in your face pressure, rush down. Cammy can still do a lot of crazy stuff like that. But I'm not so sold that that's the be all end all. I mean, if nothing else,
Yeah.
like, hey, guess who won Red Bull Kumite? So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a new era of footsies and zoning, and it's just instead of Rushdown being like, 10 out of 10, pretty much like the only kind of really truly viable style, unless you play like 3 characters. Now there's like 10 characters who can, zone, and I think Rushdown's like kind of up here.
you don't
like
so
the right
quickly
hand,
get
and then-
away from your roots like that, right? Especially when they're
Yeah.
that deep and it has been what it
Yeah.
has been in Street Fighter 5. I hear what you're
It's
saying.
so efficient. Yeah. So, but it is a new era. And it's like, okay, this is the first time, in my opinion, that Street Fighter V has actually felt like a proper Street Fighter game. And it's felt so much like Marvel before in the past. And it was a really unfortunate set of circumstances. But the game's really, it's quite nice that I think if you like the game at all, like, and if you hate it, I don't know if your mind is ever going to be changed about it. Like, fundamentally, I think the game's just got what it is, right? But if you like it at all, it's worth revisiting and kind of seeing what the game offers at this point in time, because it truly is possible to play a zoner and win now. And you could do it in the past. It was just like you had to freaking be IDOM to pull it off. It was just too damn hard to do it.
Mhm.
So anyway, all this stuff, like, we're really hyping up the zoners. It depends on also who shows up in tournament, kind of thing. If your event has a bunch of top level zoning players, like, we're going to be like, oh, like zoning's the best and other stuff like that. But again, we called this stuff. We called Europe being terrific at this freaking game. This was something we called, like, you can check the tapes. It was months ago, and we're like, look at the footage, look at how they're playing, the way they're using V-Shift. One of the things that you called individually was how much V-reversal is a factor now, and before it was just not that efficient to do it. And you saw V-reversals all up and down in the top 8, especially again with Mr. Crimson. Shoutouts to him for winning, especially with his Dalsum. He used V-reversal and V-Shift so much. I think he did those more often than he used V-trigger, and that's a gigantic change. That was like not happening ever before. So the game, it's just much more balanced now. You want to see more styles out there instead of just one kind of dominant rushdown style. That's what Street Fighter is, and Capcom gave us pretty much everything we asked for. We asked for a defensive mechanic, we asked for nerfs to high tiers. The game's looking pretty darn good. It's like, okay, like, give it, if you like it, give it another shot. But
yeah,
but
and
there it is.
I mean, we had something of a problem character emerging, or I would just maybe even say a top tier that was too evident, and we've been talking about that. And sure enough, they come in with this patch that does something where you can very, very much do something of your own accord about one of her strongest tactics, that being the dive kick. And we actually recently put up a video kind of showing you how you would explore that and how you would take advantage of that kind of approach from Cammy now, and like what your new options are. And but you mentioned V reversals again in that match with Tokido and Bonchan. This also is sort of telling about what's important and how to play this game right now. Tokido was very often trying to edge Bonchan to the corner, right? And so that he would have the advantages of having someone in the corner. But he would do offensive V reversals. So like anytime Bonchan threw too close of a fireball, Tokido would spend his meter V-reversing it to knock his opponent farther back. It was just for the space taking. And then, of course, you get that gray life. That was more important to Tokido than getting to Aegis Reflector V-Trigger. Think about that for a second. That is where our game is evolving. And this is against a character like Sagat, and how we've perceived him to be like relatively lower tier, especially compared to Urien. It's like Urien shouldn't have to be all that worried about things like, no, he's playing his game very much around just being able to control this mid-range and not just rely on Urien's explosive, this will probably work, and if it doesn't, I have 3 more, like safety nets for something else to work out. No, man, we're playing that footsies game. We're playing that manipulation of space. We're getting that gray life where we can, and that's a good sign too.